Okay, hey guys, how you doing? We're at the RSC with the Young Turks. We're with Stephen Olikara. He is the co-founder and president of Millennial Action Project. And you might remember him from a different context if you're a Young Turks viewer, because he moderated a debate that Dinesh D'Souza and I had at Politicon fairly recently. Let's just start there for a second.
Yeah.
Was that what you were expecting?
Yeah.
And how'd you feel being in the middle of that war?
I felt very comfortable being in the middle of the war, and it was what I was expecting. I think, first of all, I loved the hype leading up to it. It was a packed audience, and over 200 people apparently just sitting outside waiting to get in. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of interest, and I think the arguments were very coherent. The one issue I had, especially with one of Dinesh's core arguments, this idea that the Democratic Party has a secret history of being racist, which I think you brought to bear, the fact that it's not a secret. There was the switch between the Republicans and Democrats, and a switch between which is the Progressive Party.
Yeah, it's amazing and really frustrating how well that what I view to be a silly talking point works. I had a Diamond and Silk on here. I know they're a little silly, but I think they do genuinely support Trump. Right. Those are the Trump sisters, and they're like, no, the Democrats are the secret racists. I'm like,
right.
No, but it's a document. There's nothing secret about it, like you said. And the party switched. But I guess since not a lot of people talk about it, they think, oh, secret.
Right.
Oh, we figured it out. Right?
Because that's what gets people excited to buy the documentary, right? Oh, it's a secret. I need to learn about it. I need to buy the documentary. And the other thing, I don't know if you remember at the end, we talked about why do young people need to get involved. And his answer talked about what is the meaning of conservatism. He said we need to conserve the founding principles of this country. Well, Thomas Jefferson believed in education. He believed in science and evidence. He referred to the search for knowledge as a light. And he said that light and liberty go together. That was the case for many of the founding fathers. So if we want to talk about the 21st century Republican Party, it's a party that I think is conservative and embraces science like our founding fathers did, embraces diversity like James Madison said was essential to the functioning of our democracy, but also believes in the power of markets, free enterprise, and entrepreneurship to solve problems. So that's what I wish he was going to get at, but I think, again, he wanted to embrace his other talking points.
Well, conservatives, I don't know if this is being fair or unfair to them, have an institutional disadvantage with the young. Because the young are more open to change. Right. And conservatives, he's right, do want to conserve. Right. So they want to conserve the old ways, tradition. So grandpas are usually into conserving the old ways because they're old. Right. And so that's part of the reason why the young usually lean left. But I would argue, and I would be backed up by a lot of polls in this argument, that this is a different generation. Yeah. It's not just the normal slightly leaning left crowd. That this millennials group is more progressive than any generation we have ever seen in our lifetimes. Yeah. Not just in our lifetimes, but as far back as polling goes.
Yeah. I think it's so progressive that it's actually hard to figure out where they fit on the partisan boxes. So here, I'll give a couple examples. So we're obviously very pro-gay marriage, pro-pot legalization. We're pro-progressive on a lot of social issues. And I think the Bernie Sanders candidacy has influenced us tremendously. And so now you're seeing record high levels of association with socialism. There's a recent Harvard poll confirming that a few days ago. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, millennials are very pro Uber, Lyft, and the sharing economy. We believe that there needs to be a new social contract. You do see a departure from the traditional Democratic Party views on unions, for example. We're pro-education reform, and we think that we need to be rewarding our teachers and not just rewarding seniority. We believe in the power of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of data showing that we're more entrepreneurial than any other generation. We believe in the peer-to-peer solutions. Our group has been the leaders in enacting crowdfunding legislation for entrepreneurs, so you don't have to rely on the institutional VC funders, but now you can, in a Kickstarter kind of fashion, crowdfund equity for your business. So where does that really fit in? And on civil liberties issues, we're extremely libertarian, and we identify, I think, a lot with Ron Paul supporters and Rand Paul supporters when it comes to surveillance reform and privacy. So, I mean, there are a variety of views, and I always say we're the a la carte generation because we don't identify with a partisan identity. A majority of us identify as independent. So both parties have a lot to learn and a lot to work on if they're going to attract our generation.
And Stephen knows all about this because he runs the Millennial Action Project, where he's interacting with youth, serving them. You've done events here. You've done it you're going to do it at the DNC.
Right.
But let me touch on all those things that
Sure.
you just said there. You know, as you listed all those things, I thought that's everything the Young Turks stand for.
Yeah, 100%.
And so it's not surprising that we have a giant millennial audience because we totally agree.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's because it's a new generation that grew up on a new media.
That's right.
Because media is culture.
Right.
And so the old culture was partisan. Like you're either Team Democrat or you're Team Republican.
Right.
I don't know any young person, I don't want to say any, but hardly any, who gives a damn.
Yeah, that's
like,
right.
I mean, it's like you're talking about, hey, which night are you in favor of in the jousting challenge tonight? We don't do that anymore. We don't. So I don't know what you're talking about. There is no jousting left.
That's right.
And so, at the same time, I think that if the conservatives, let's put it this way, the conservatives would be greatly served if they actually had principles and stuck with them.
That's right.
If they were to say, hey, we're actually for the free market, which means I'm not going to give away all these billions of dollars in subsidies. I'm not going to only serve the rich, and all they care about is cutting their taxes.
Yep.
Their talking points are so transparent, so not based on principle, so based on what their donors want them to do, that it's nearly impossible to rally younger people who grew up on the internet and had access to real information to the conservative cause. And to the point where I think the libertarians stand a real good chance of becoming the new right-leaning party.
Exactly.
What's your take on that?
And I agree completely, because millennials have an excellent BS radar. And even if we don't know all the minutiae of the different issues, we can call out BS when we see it. We can call out inconsistencies and hypocrisy when we see it. And so the major donors of the Republican Party have corrupted not only their own party, but have in many ways corrupted many of the people who get involved in Republican politics. And that's the problem. The reason why libertarians, I think, have a lot of success over the long term, or will have a lot of success, is because they're intellectually honest, they're consistent.
That's right.
The reason why Senator Rand Paul did worse than Ron Paul in this election is because, in running for president, is because he wasn't consistent. And the millennial Republicans and libertarians were able to call him out on that. And as a result, I think they're either gravitating to Gary Johnson, or they just didn't organize in the way they needed to support Rand Paul in order for him to be successful.
So there's a lot that I really disagree with the libertarians on, but that's a good, healthy debate. That's part of democracy.
Absolutely.
At least they're honest about their positions.
Exactly.
Now, look, I'm afraid that money is going to corrupt them as well.
Yeah.
So my main disagreement with Gary Johnson, who I respect a lot, I've had on the show many times, is that he wants more money in politics. Well, he's been lucky so far that he hasn't had a lot of it.
Yeah.
The reason that's lucky is because it has not had that corrupting influence.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
that's coming.
Yeah.
The more money he gets, the more he's going to be beholden to those guys.
Yeah.
And here we go round and round. And I don't want anybody to think we're partisan. You know, everybody that watches the Young Turks knows we think that money also corrupted Hillary Clinton.
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
massive way. And it's not her fault.
Yeah.
That's just the system.
Yeah, that's right.
And so anybody in that position, and that's why we've got problems with almost all the establishment Democrats.
Right.
The one guy that said, hey, you know what, I'm not going to take that corrupting money. I'm going to take it $27 at a time.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of millennials were really energized by him.
Exactly.
And the establishment is still sitting there going, gee, I wonder why they liked him. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, you're in Washington, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, they really don't get it, do they?
No, not at all. They don't get it at all because they've been conditioned to not only exist in the system, but profit from the system for the past 30 years. And when I look at other groups in our space that have been founded or led by people who've been in DC for a long time, they just have a different playbook. And I'll give a really good example of this. When we first started in 2013, people thought we were naive because we weren't starting a PAC to shake money in front of politicians and tell them what we wanted to do. And we said, no, we're going to play a different game here because we want people to engage because they care about the mission and they believe that this is the future of our country. If we're shaking money in front of them, then they're responding for the wrong incentives. So we said we're going to play a different game. And I think that's why we've been pretty successful. People are into this for the right reasons. But the old Washington hands believe that money rules everything, and that's the problem. And millennials are so sick and tired of a political system that's corrupted. I talk to friends back home in Wisconsin who say they will not vote until we see money in politics reform. 82% of millennials do not trust Congress to do the right thing. So as
and
long
they're
as
absolutely right.
Until that changes, we're not going to see any improvement. But I'm actually very, very optimistic about money in politics reform, more than I think most people are, because I see an opportunity for Sanders and Trump supporters to come together, the Progressive Caucus and the Freedom Caucus to come together. I see so many opportunities between the left and the right. We work with a group led by Dave Bratt's campaign manager called Take Back Our Republic, which is pushing for these types of libertarian conservative solutions to the issue. And they're talking about immediate transparency. They're talking about a tax credit for individuals to give campaign contributions. I think those types of opportunities have the chance to build left-right consensus. And you know who will be against it? Is the establishment center, and that's going to be a fun debate to have.
So you have no idea how correct Stephen is, because you guys don't get to see the behind-the-scenes stuff. So you're right, the conservative group you mentioned, I think they're really principled, and I think that's exactly what we need. We can disagree till the end of the day about all the other issues. But we got to get back to a real debate, and they agree, get the money out so that we can get back to democracy. And but a lot of the older groups, I'm not ready to name names yet, but I will one day. Okay, and including the so-called progressive groups.
Oh, absolutely.
They get the same money. Their board is also controlled by millionaires and billionaires, and they don't want any change.
Exactly.
They pretend to want change, but they don't actually want it, and they don't practice it. In fact, they fight against it.
Exactly. And the key here is not just we need money in politics reform in the congressional politics and the way we finance campaigns, but we also need money in politics reform in the media. And that's why I have so much respect for what the Young Turks is doing, I'm not trying to pander to your audience, because we've talked about this off air. The point is that we need a media that responds to the concerns of the majority of the American people and not just a handful of donors. And if we're talking about, I'll give an example. The Keystone Pipeline was such a distorted debate. The right talked about creating jobs, which was proven to create maybe 35 permanent jobs. The left, too, were talking about this is the worst thing ever to happen to our environment, which is also factually false. But those groups who are propagating those messages were funded by special interests who had a reason to get those groups to say those words. And the real debate wasn't happening. And so we need more organizations and media outlets like the Young Turks. So I have a lot of respect for what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So where can people find out more about Millennial Action Project?
So they can go to www.millennialaction.org. They can search the Future Caucus on Google, and they can see that the dominant narrative has changed in Congress. Now it's usual for the young members of Congress to work together in a bipartisan way. They've built these generational relationships. And so over the long term, I think we're going to have a lot more consensus building in our politics, which will make people like James Madison very happy.
Let's go make James Madison happy, everybody. All right, Stephen, thank you so much for being on.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.